Good evening, good afternoon. I'm Barbara Winnery, and I am chair of the League of Women Voters State Education Task Force. I'm also a board of director member and am actively involved with voter service as well in our activities related. For other participants, what I'd like to have you do, since I don't want to take a lot of time
Right.
of having people sign up. So what I'd like to have you put your league, your league, what city you're from. If you're not from a league, just where you're from in Colorado. So we know who's all attending and where you're attending from across the state. Um, and I think that's it. The other direction I'll give you is once we get started, uh, if you have questions as we go along, would you please put them in the chat? If we'll talk, Lisa, is it okay if they raise their hand during your presentation, or would you rather go through it and then talk?
No, I'm fine. I kind of plan on chunking it out where I'm going to go through a few slides and then kind of stop. It's kind of the end of that area. And then I'll probably do that like 3 times, see if there's
Oh,
any questions. But I'll have a hard time monitoring the chat. So if you see
no,
a question, you want to stop me, please do. Yeah.
I
Okay.
will. Okay, well,
Perfect.
we'll kind of do it that way, but if you want to raise your hand, I can recognize you too, if you want to ask a question at an appropriate juncture.
Yep.
The Education Task Force this year has been following all the developments of what has been going on at the federal government level. And as many of you know about the dismantling of the Federal Department of Education and the impact it has as far as losing programs, federal funding of state programs, numerous title programs, special education programs specifically. We've had some programs on the civil rights issues and protections and enforcements that we may have lost. And we haven't really covered this, but we've been keeping an eye on what's been going on with the related executive orders and DEI and curriculum and how it may impact us. So there's a lot happening in education, and I thought it was important for us to hear from the Colorado State Board of Education. And I've invited Dr. Lisa Escargia.
Ersiga. You're so close.
Ersiga. That's close. She's from District 1. Her background was she began her 36-year career in education as a school psychologist, and she most recently served as the executive director of the Colorado Association of School Executive, often known as CASE. She's going to speak to us today and bring us up to speed on what's really happening with all of these things that have been slowly finding their way down to the state level, and we're beginning to have to confront and deal with them in terms of what are the federal and state education issues, what's the role of the State Board of Education, what kinds of things are they going to be dealing with, and to answer any questions you might have about what's really happening. So Lisa, I'm really pleased to have you here tonight. So thank you for coming, and it's all yours.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I went through the list of things that you said. Could you talk about these things? It's a lot, right? That we can't ignore that it's a lot. And I don't know, I'll cover like what I can in about the 25, 30 minutes. But feel free if I haven't hit something you want to talk about. I may or may not know the answer or have even, any information, but I'm willing to give it a shot. So, as we go through, this is a presentation, partly, it's actually been updated, that I've been giving all around Denver to the House districts, to people, because I got frustrated with what the press was reporting or not reporting on what was happening with federal and state education and funding. And so I have done this presentation and I've updated, as of last week, it's been a quiet week. So I think this is pretty up to date. Anyway, I'd like to also acknowledge this group here, which is AESA, the School Superintendents Association. It's a national association that does all of these updates. They do these PowerPoints. They send them to me all the time. I'm a retired member. They have lobbyists that work at the federal level, do a fantastic job of representing every state and all types of districts throughout the nation with education issues. So I acknowledge them at the beginning of my presentations because I take a lot of their slides and they know it and they're okay with it. All right. So first though, I want to ground us in who we are as like what is our student population right now in our state? We say roughly 900,000. We're 881,000 students. When you look on the left, you see we're still 178 school districts, been that way for a long time, just a little under 2,000 schools. And then if you look at the breakup or the makeup of who our students are, we are now in public schools a majority minority state. So less than 50% of our students now self-identify as white. If you look to the right, you see free reduced lunch at, 44. Students with IEPs is 13. That's crept up over years. It used to always be about 10, 11. Multilingual learners, 12. I know districts that have 70, 50, 60% English learners. So you can see there's a wide variation of that. And then our homeless, that's McKenty-Vento, is about 2%. So this is just a kind of reminder. This would be for maybe people a little less attuned to what the feds do than you, but I always put this in there. So what does the federal department do? And you can see the list here. It's about education laws. It's about school accountability. They send through the funds that Congress appropriates for us. This fourth bullet, they're supposed to enforce the laws prohibiting discrimination. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that as we get going. They do the policy around financial aid. That's all your student loan stuff. They do that. And they also do the administration of it. And then they do the collection of data. We have the National Center for Education Statistics up there and some other things you've heard that have been having issues. And but they maintain those databases and we send a lot of information to them. So I didn't put this on a slide, but what do we do then? And it's an interesting thing because people will say, well, we're going to, the current administration says we're going to send education back to the states. And it's like, actually, the vast, vast majority of education is in our states, right? We do the learning standards. We choose the curriculum. We hire teachers, the principals, the administrators. We do discipline. We do school calendars, buildings, everything like that, maintenance, graduation requirements. I mean, so we basically do everything. I would say at least 95% of what we do is just, state and local, all right? So let's go on. So let's start here with the DEI letter, because this is where actually I got the most angry at what I was not hearing. So y'all are familiar, we got that letter that said from the president, basically said, we want all you state chiefs to sign this letter saying that you're not using illegal DEI practices within your schools. And you've got about 10 days to get this letter signed. So the chiefs and like our commissioner and all the commissioners just got together immediately and started going back and forth and got our opinion. Our opinion was, oh, no signing of that letter. And so this middle part of the slide talks about the rationale we gave for why we're not signing that letter. Right. And besides the fact, one, we always sign assurances saying we are not violating any federal or state laws in our programs. So yes, you can give us money. We sign these assurances for every single, whether it's special ed, title funds, migrant, we always sign assurances. So we've already told you we aren't. And then it just kind of goes through, and what the most concerning, of course, was the question of what is DEI? There is no legal definition of DEI. You want us to sign saying we're not doing something that we don't even know what the legal definition is. So we did not sign that. Well, on the bottom of the slide, it talks about, so of course, we immediately sued. We are one of the states, several states sued. It got blocked in court. And actually, I think it was in Washington, D.C. Well, we got a notice from the Federal Department of Ed that's saying exactly this, that they will take no further action considering the Title VI certification letter unless and until further notice is provided. So it's gone, right? It's done. But people don't know that. They think, oh my God, the federal department got rid of DEI. The federal department didn't touch DEI, as far as I'm concerned, in our state. Not really. I would say that there were subtle things that were happening. For like number one, all the districts were pretty much urged immediately to get with your district's legal counsel, do a review of your policies and your practices to make sure that you aren't inadvertently doing something. And here's a list you should be looking for, right? So that's probably just a good thing to have happened. And then I noticed that a few districts when I went through, I could hear some chatter. It's like, well, we retitled our equity office to our community and something office, right? They started taking away the word equity out of some things simply to avert being pulled up in a Google search. Right. I mean, because they know what's happening. Right. So they started to kind of lay low a little bit. But have they changed their practices? Like, has Denver Public Schools changed any of their standards or practices? No, we have not. Okay. And then to the Department of Ed closure. So this you're familiar with because you guys have all talked about it, where they laid off about half of the employees. And we all know, actually, the president doesn't have the authority. Only Congress can officially get rid of the Department of Ed. So of course, everybody sued on good grounds. We are one of the states that did that. And then you heard about the Supreme Court ruling. And this is, again, what kind of frustrated with me. It says, yes, the Supreme Court said, no, you can go ahead and fire those people. That is true. But if you go down to the bottom, what it didn't tell you is that these court cases are still ongoing. What the Supreme Court said was, while you're being sued, while this is being litigated, we will allow you to go ahead and have kept those people fired. And they were all paid, by the way. I believe most of them had been receiving pay up until this point. Now they don't have to be paid anymore. But the issue of the legal challenge is still ongoing in fact, there's several suits ongoing, right? So hopefully there will be something, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit about the new Senate proposal that actually gets to that point that tries to address that. Okay. And then third, this is before, I take some questions here. This is the part about OCR. So, there was the initial, chatter about threats that we were going to lose funding if we didn't comply with different things. And of course, that part got stopped right away. But certainly, I'm looking and it says there has been about 276 staff that were laid off from the Office of Civil Rights, and the court has ordered them to be rehired. But it appears as the department is feeling very emboldened based on this Supreme Court case with the Department of Ed folks. They're saying, yeah, we'll wait you out. We're just gonna leave these people on leave. So, and actually, I don't know if any of you read the 74. It's like a newsletter that comes out. They had an article today on this very topic. It's called The 74, number 74, that I think would be worth reading because it really updates you on this. But what this slide just talks about is that, OCRs basically from when I was in school districts and working on the side of having had to work with districts so they could comply with OCR compliance. That type of give and take and the process we see on the left would take many, many months to go through before a district may have a finding, or the district may say, we will agree to come to terms, right? Which, so you're not found to be out of compliance, but you agree to do these things together. And then you implement a plan for as long as OCR wants you to, and they monitor. It could take even a year or more. And they have fast tracked that to the right. That's what this is about, where they're now using Office for Civil Rights as more as an aggressor, right? They are actually going in on their own without getting complaints from places. That's the east bathroom, although there was kind of a complaint with that. So there's a question. You want to ask the question, Barbara?
Yeah, I do. It seemed to me when I was following some of this, that they put that Office of Civil Rights in the Attorney General's office and gave, appointed some new leadership to it that might impact how it's being handled.
Yes, yes. And the other thing that isn't very public, but is absolutely happening, is they immediately went and closed a whole bunch of cases that they had on their dockets. And one of them includes Denver Public Schools, where they have a consent decree. And basically, OCR came in and said, well, you're probably okay with that now. But the board has taken this on, and the Denver Public School Board said, we are going to commit to this decree that we have, and we're not backing away from it, even though we're off the hook. But they're doing that to a whole lot of individuals. So what you will see coming up this next legislative session is some legislation, and I think you look to Jen Bacon, look to some individuals. They're going to try to beef up the state's civil rights division
Good.
around 504 and Title VI. 504 is, like not special ed, but adjacent to that, because special ed, the department actually has quite a good enforcement. So we'll kind of beef that up. We're going to beef the 504, but the Title VI part. And they're just working now through details, right? Where will it sit? Who's going to fund it? But I begged for it, and they were already working on it. And I believe that's a good first start for us to try to, be able to maintain the level of integrity to some of this that we've seen in the past. So
Thank you.
you bet. Okay, so next we get to talk about the fun little stuff we had in the last month, right? I guess it seems like it's so long ago, but I guess it was just the end of May, so the last 2 months. And we have the, I call it the funding freeze or whatever. It really started in May, though, when the commissioner let us know. She goes, I'm getting a little nervous. Usually at this point, we hear about money that's coming in. We get notice. They call them grant awards. We get notice ahead of time that says this is about how much you're going to get. And this is when you'll get it, which is always the, July 1 for us. And she said, I'm just not hearing a lot, and we're not getting anything from them. And the more every day and then every week that went by, it became more and more apparent something was going on. And anything that we tried to send up requests and correspondence was either slowly gotten back to or not at all. And even when it got back to us, it was this generic kind of signature. It was very strange. So people were starting to already understand something was going on and this could happen. And then it was on actually the day before the money was supposed to hit the accounts where they said, yeah, we're going to hold a chunk of your title dollars, not everything, not even most of it actually. But for us, it was, depend upon what you wanted, 60, 70 million, somewhere around there. And we're going to do administrative review, which of course, I'm telling you, they never did an administrative review of all the programs that this thing funds, but that's beside the point. This is what they said they were doing. And of course, if you kind of followed along the local impact, I think it was Lake County did a great job of explaining, hey, we use these after school 21st century funds for after school care for a lot of our school employees and our classified staff, right? Our custodians, our food service workers, all these folks, secretaries. And suddenly they're going to come to work the next week and not have this. We can't afford it without this. And she did a great job of explaining the immediate impact on this. I'm going to talk about our department in a moment. So again, state stepped up, filed their lawsuits, but I don't think it was the lawsuits that changed their mind. It was that bullet around both parties. You had 9 Republicans sign on to a letter saying, you're hurting us. We want this money, and here's the thing. And I think it started to become bipartisan. And that's when they said, oh, okay, we'll go ahead and release that money. So they did do that, right? And then here is what we as a state got back. It's money we were expecting. And this to just, and I'm going to just tell you what these are. The first one is Migrant Ed. And the second one is for teacher professional learning. Title III is for our English learners. Title IV-A, this is our after school for 21st century grant programs. And then we have adult ed and literacy, right? Now at the bottom, this is what I kind of just threw that number in there. I give people a sense of what we're talking about. The Colorado out of their education budget spends about 10 billion on education. It's a really nice big round number now that's easy to remember. It's about 10 billion. Then of all of that money, almost 1 billion, it's 870 million, but I think it's closer to 9. So about 1 billion is added to that comes from the federal government. So the state and local pays over 90% of public education in our state. And that's when I tell the story. I got a call from my very conservative brother who said, well, how's your board work going? And I said, well, fine. He goes, well, aren't you like done now? And I go, what do you mean? He goes, well, them getting rid of the Department of Ed and everything and Doge finding all that money. Aren't you like done? And I said, well, Cliff, the state actually funds 90% of public education in our state. And he went, oh. And I mean, totally like they have him believing we're going away, public ed is going away. So could not be further from the truth. Now, 10% still a lot of money, right? It's still a lot. And it's used for very good reasons. The Colorado Department of Ed is not 10%. Our staff is 43% funded by the federal government money. Because what we do is administer, a large part of what we do is we administer federal program dollars, right? The money comes to us and then through formula gets spread out. And we do the monitoring and we do the reporting back to the feds. And, we put the numbers up of which kids are eligible so we know how much money. We do a lot of support and coaching about allowable uses and all these kinds of things, right? So it's not surprising a large percentage of our staff is funded with those dollars. So just keep that in mind. Yes. Hey, Liz.
Hi, Lisa. So those dollars on this slide, this does not include like any private grant money that is spent somehow in public education, right? These are just all of the public dollars, not other stuff that may be spent. Am I understanding that right?
That is correct. That is correct, right? So it's about 10 billion. Yeah, but yes, any kind of external money, anything, none of that would be included in here. That's just money that comes from tax revenue and everything from state and local share and gets into the school finance formula. Good question.
Thank you.
You bet. Good to see you. All right. So this is what I want to point out though, is these days, I just kind of listed this off the top of my head, right? So this is what happened to us, where we know we don't think we're going to get this money. It's not looking very good. And we're wondering what else they're going to take from us. So before the state did it, we did a hiring freeze in the 7th of July and just put it out there. Then on the 14th, they all went to court and they sued, right? Well, a week later, we don't know what's going on, and our migrant money is not coming in as far as we know. And we have a migrant department, the director, his name is Tomas Mejia. I've known him for 25 years, maybe. His father actually worked in DC and was one of the founders of the migrant program that started all of this, right? There could be nobody more invested in migrant ed than this man. But we have to put a layoff, just like the state law requires. We have to do a notice that we're going to do a mass layoff because we don't have in the department, like even school districts, there is no reserve fund, right? There is no extra money sitting. We can't just go ask the legislature to suddenly pull some money because they're not even in session, right? It doesn't work like that. If we don't have the dollars from the federal government to run a federal program, we can't run the program, right? We just don't have the money. It's just the way it works. Well, then on the 25th, 4 days later, after these people think they're all out of work, 4 days later, we're all up in the mountains doing this conference and we hear this rumor. that the money might be coming in. And we were all like, what? And then sure enough, we did later on that day find out it was coming in. And on the 1st, we did get the notice. We immediately rescinded that layoff notice because we have a migrant program for 1 more year. And then we've taken away the hiring freeze and then just put it into a hiring review, right? We're going to just be very strategic moving forward. But that's the kind of whiplash results that is just within our department. You can imagine what some of the school districts had to go through, especially with your before and after school programs, your ELA programs, your programs for English learners, which some of these districts get quite a bit of money from these grants, right? And I think Case has actually collected stories, and you're going to hear more and more about this in the upcoming year. How are we doing on time? Good? All right.
Yeah,
I'll
we're
kind of
good. We're good.
okay, good. All right.
Yeah. I was
I
just
got-
gonna mention while give you a breath there.
Yep.
I can't remember what program I was on, but there was one with the school superintendent this July who was brand new school superintendent and somewhere up in the mountains. And I think it was Rifle, but I can't remember for sure. But he just walked in. He had one of these programs, ESL programs with the community, and he'd hired staff to help coordinate between the schools and the community. And he had no money, and he was just panicking about
Yes.
what he was
Right.
going to do. Could he hold on to these employees? Did he have to let them go? And it was going to impact, I don't know, about 1,500 students, and their families,
Yes.
the way it was set up. So there was a lot of angst, I think, out in the field around some
Very much, very much. And
funding problems.
so I'm going to talk now about what we expect maybe in the following year. And just kind of try to move through this fairly quickly because it's all unknown, but it's just what we know at the moment. This slide just is always a reminder. I actually have to go look this up every time I talk about it. What's the difference between reconciliation and appropriations? But reconciliation is a legal process that allows the president and Congress to get through a budget bill with a simple, with a simple majority. There you go. I need to move my people over. That's what I need to do so I can see the slide. There we are. And the one that just passed, so the big, beautiful, the HR1, I call it, HR1 that just passed. It has the new voucher bill in it. I could talk about it at the end. We'll probably run out of time, but that's where Medicaid is, school-based Medicaid programs, right? To the right is appropriations. That is where our money for education comes from. And that has to be voted on and approved by Congress. And so like in our state, the School Finance Act starts either in the House or the Senate, and then it just goes back and forth, right? Here at the federal level, each chamber actually puts together their own bills around these areas. And then they go to committee and then they go into conference committee, right? Because they're usually not even close, right? So in its appropriations where we still don't know what's going to be for the following year, they always do it kind of like we lag a year. The money they're talking about now will be for July 1 of 26. We've got our money for this year now. All of our federal dollars, our Title I dollars, our special ed dollars are all here. They just pile it in and that's it. So we're not going to, they could rescind maybe, but for this year up until next June 30th, we think we're okay. So what are we looking at? All right. Oh, you can read this. Good. On a big screen, you can read this, but you don't have to. So the president, right? This is kind of the joke up at the Capitol. The president does a budget for proposal, right? And we say it's always DOA, just dead on arrival. The Chamber, Senate, and the House do not pay attention to the president's budget. This is different times. This is a different president. So we're not so sure it's going to be just, blown off like it has been in the past. So the president his proposal is cutting education by about 6.5 billion overall. It's a big chunk. They keep Title I. The consolidating the IDEA grants isn't as bad of a problem. It's the next one where they want to actually take a whole bunch of programs and consolidate them into what they call a block grant. So they just give you a whole big chunk of money and they say, here are all the programs you can fund however you would like. Of according to what you think your state needs. And because we put it as a block grant, you need less people to run it, you need less things, and they're going to cut it by 2 billion. So they're going to save some money while they're doing it. Block grants are a terrible idea as far as this piece goes. And they want to eliminate, his budget eliminated 5 programs, including Title I Part C, that's migrant, and then Title III, which is our English language learners money. So they're going after immigrants, refugees, any supports for these students, they are trying to take. The crazy thing is, even like migrants, most of the migrants in our country are born here. Many of the students in our English language learner program are born here. And it's kind of a mess. And then this is a nice little graphic. This reminds me of what the Colorado Institute puts out all the time, the Fiscal Institute. But that green line up on top, if we just went with inflation, moved up with inflation, that's how much we should be spending. Yellow bars are what we actually do get every year. And then the blue bar is the president's proposal. So you can see, they want to take funding levels back quite a few years. Okay. And then this is just an illustrative piece. So this is done, but here's your programs on the left again, right? Your Title I, special ed is IDEA. You've got your professional learning, ELA, after school programs, impact aid. That's military impact aid for areas that are around military bases, get that money. And then your REAP is your rural ed money. So in 24, that's about how much all of those programs were funded. Now, Congress could not get these bills passed in time after 24, so they did what they call a continuing resolution, which means to stop the shutdown. And then all of the programs just continue at current level. So that's where we've been for the last year, is really off of 24 levels. So then coming for the 25 budget, they make their proposals. These are not the ones on the floor currently, but the point here is that you see the Senate is all in black. So they're level funding or small increases for almost all our programs. The House in the middle, where all the red is, that's typical of what the House does. They want to cut a whole bunch of money out of Title I. They want to get rid of Title II in its entirety, all professional learning, and they want to get rid of Title III, the money for the ELA kids, okay? So that's what you're going to be hearing the fights about, I should say, or the discussion. Now, this was interesting because this is the new piece, right? Because this just came out this last week. And this is I had to look up the title. Labor, Health, and Human Services Education and Related Agencies is what LHHS stands for. It's where education is at the federal level, right? Lumped in with all these other groups. So their committee they proposed their first education funding levels for next year, starting July 1. And you heard this kind of like a little bit of a slap to the administration. Well, what they did is they said, we want to level fund everything. We do not want to cut any funding. They were not going to cut Title III, nothing, including the Department of Ed money. Right? They have money in there to continue with the Department of Ed. They put more money in for the Office for Civil Rights. They expect that to maintain, right? So it was really a nice kind of a thumb your nose at the president's budget. And then what's really nice is these next 4 bullets. So I had to actually bold them out because the first thing they said is, and you can't block grant these programs. You've got to keep them all separate and you have to keep them level funded. Right? You have to keep them. So that was one win. The second one is the Secretary of Education, when those formula funds become available, you got to get them out the door that day. You can't hold on to them. Like, okay, so somebody's paying attention to what's going on. Third thing is that this is what I was talking about. You got to ensure that those staffing levels are where they need to be. Now, the Department of Ed is functioning at half staff. It is functioning, not great. So there's kind of wiggle room on that one. But this last one is really important too, because it prohibits the Department of Ed from taking programs and putting them into other areas. And that's what special ed, they have been proposing to move special ed out of Department of Ed and putting it in Health and Human Services. And the State Senate Committee said, don't do that. You can't do that. This reminds me a little of the No Child Left Behind, when we revised in ESSA, where they said, you know what? State, federal government, you can't have anything to do with standards, no more. Remember, there was that pushback around the Common Core standards and everybody got upset about it. So inside the statute, they said, you can't do standards for states anymore, and you can't punish them for the standards they adopt. You can't do curriculum. You can't withhold funds because of it. And that's actually what's protecting us now, believe it or not, is what happened back then. So this is kind of reminiscent of that. You good?
Good.
All
So
right,
is this the proposed bill? It hasn't been acted on yet.
correct. So this has to go through now to the House as a whole, or the Senate, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Senate.
And it has to get 60 votes. So it's not an easy win. On the other hand, the House, if you had a proposal like the House to do all the cutting, they'd have to get 9 Democrats to vote on that, and that's not going to happen either. So what you'll see is this just kind of back and forth, back and forth. And my guess is they don't get enough votes to do anything again. And we may end up very well. They only have till October 1. We may have another continuing resolution that they just go, okay, I guess we'll just leave it as it is, and then onward we go. I wouldn't be surprised, but that's not what the president wants. He really wants to see cuts to a lot of this stuff. So
Sure.
maintain.
Kathy Wilson has a question.
Yeah,
You bet.
I'm curious as to why, I think what you said, the House wanted to eliminate all the professional development money.
Yeah.
Why? I mean, do they think that every state is able to fund that?
I'd have to take a guess at it, and my guess is they believe that they're learning all this woke ideology in their professional learning, and they're using it to support kids that they don't know how to teach, like second language learners or your migrant kids. And they just, I'm pretty sure that's what it is, because a lot of the universities do have the contracts for this professional learning, and they just, I think that's probably it. Yeah.
It's just absolutely amazing to me, because if you're going to get, in my view, if you're going to get really positive results with learning, and demonstrating learning, you're going to get that because the teachers have had really good professional development and able to support them. So it's like very shallow thinking, in my opinion.
Very good. All
I
right,
think
so look, if
There
you
was a
wanna,
question, there's a question back about whether or not the money that was released, has it gotten out to school districts? I think that was the essence of that.
yes, yes, it has. Yes, yes. It immediately goes, it's immediate flow through, and the districts knew immediately that they have it. And so it's a fascinating process. They were gonna, anyway, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so all districts are whole, everything's fine, and they're all doing the work. And the billing and stuff may be a little delayed and things, but they're all fine now with this.
Great.
Yep. And we got just a little less than the previous year, but that's because we have a little fewer students that qualified. That was the only issue we had.
Okay.
So I thought I'd talk about the Healthy Meals for All for just a little bit, because you asked about this, and this is where I can get over my head pretty quickly. But this is just a reminder of what the program is, and it allows, it started in 23-24, and the reimbursement is really for paying for students that didn't qualify for the federal program. So all kids could get free meals, right? And it's something I strongly support. Having been a child of growing up very, very poor and growing up in foster care, hunger is a real thing. And so feeding kids is like one of my number one things I like to support. So I like the Healthy Meals for All. Now, you know that, and this was all pretty clear, that because it was so popular, and then we had costs going up, et cetera, that there was a pretty significant gap in between what the program costs and what we were bringing in. So they spent quite a bit of time this last session figuring out how to fix that hole. And they came up with 2 different ballot initiatives that they're going to be sending through. One is that there was some excess revenue above the Tabor cap that we have to ask the voters, can we keep it and use it for this? And the answer, hopefully is yes, but you have to go back to the voters. So that's the first part of the ballot. And then the second part was, raising new funds to just help stabilize the program is what we have here, right? To make it whole. Now, this is the interesting part, and this is what you're going to hear about in the special session coming up. So, and I'm getting hit by the sun, so I'm going to move around a little bit. Really, really kind of strange. Okay. Because of HR 1, it changes the amount that individuals can use for deductions. So the way Healthy Meals was funded here in our state is if you make 300,000 or more, you have to add back half of your federal deductions back into your state income tax and pay tax on it. And that money is used to pay for Healthy Meals for All. Well, there's the way the tax structure's working with HR 1, more of that kind of money is now going to actually come in to the state of Colorado. Because if you're able to deduct even more from your taxes, which again, higher wage earners, higher income level or homes, especially married couples, they'll be able to deduct more. Well, they're going to be adding more back in to their state taxes. And this is our chief financial officer explained it to me. And I used to do taxes, but I was like, okay, I get it enough to say it's interesting that this may be the one like little lining around that goofy bill is we may be getting more money. However, so the special session that's going to happen next week, starting next week, they also understand that. And with the SNAP benefits being reduced, you're giving on one side, you're giving food on one and you're taking away from another. You're going to hear conversations about them maybe using some of this healthy meal money to fill in for SNAP. I've heard people say, oh, please don't do the two of them together. Don't keep them separate. Others that say, look, we have to do whatever it is we can to, cover both these programs. So I just wanted you to know
Thank you.
That's probably what's going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd heard some rumblings that some things that they're going to discuss might impact those ballot measures.
Yes.
So thank you.
Yeah. And at this point, do you want to just do question answers? My next couple slides are just about the voucher piece inside the big, beautiful bill, but I got to tell you, we have lots of time to talk about that. I mean, we have more time because it doesn't take an effect until 27. And there's really other outside of what we know of has been reported in our state, there's just no impact right now. So around the voucher, but I can talk about it if you like.
Well, just briefly, so people kind of have an understanding of what's going on with it and whether or not there's some conversations, whether or not states can opt in or opt out and that sort of thing.
All right. Well, I've got a couple slides on it, so that's why I could. So, yep, come prepared. I have no idea. Oh, okay, I see. This is not my graphic over here. I'm like, that's kind of cute.
It is.
Yeah, exactly.
Not cute. Not cute.
It's not cute, but it's drawn. So essentially, we have what is being termed our first federal voucher program. And what it is you can, as an individual, I can donate $1,700 of my money to a nonprofit that has been approved by the state, the feds. We're not sure. There's no rules yet. So this is why we're kind of going, But in theory, I could donate it to a nonprofit organization who then can put these together and give away scholarships to students. They can give them to go to private school. They can do it for tutoring after school, whatever. And you see here, they're estimating it could go up to $51 billion a year, get siphoned off from tax money that would go to run the government or whatever, could be siphoned off eventually into this type of pot. The better news, though, what we talk about is that there is a limit, because when they first talked about doing this, it was going to be no limits. And that was really scary because you could have very large donors just donate huge amounts of money and basically just take an entire population and send them to private school. So they did put a limit on it, and they said no homeschooling allowed, which in our state flows with what we do. We do not fund, we fund part-time homeschoolers who do enrichment programs. They come to our schools and they actually get enrichment, but we don't fund parents to teach their kids at home, even if they are a teacher, right? So this kind of aligns with our thinking. The Treasury is the one that's supposed to be able to actually set the regulations, and we don't know what that's going to look like. And then we have, like it said, 18 months to determine, determine what we're going to do on this. And so it's going to be one of these questions like, is it Polis decides, the legislature, can they get involved? And then can they put a bill together that helps decide if we're in or if we're out? And I can tell you this, North Carolina is the first one so far I've heard of. You probably read about it. Their governor wrote a letter or whatever, and he said, we're opting out. There's a lot of talk around the nation that may not be the best idea, that you may actually want to opt into this if and when we know that we as a state can say, look, we're going to give it to all public schools, that they are all eligible. I think you'd have to include private in our state. But if we were allowed to say, you know what, we're going to use this. In fact, there's a paper out of CU has done a paper that suggested, look, we say, okay, we'll buy into this because this could be a lot of money, like our ESSA money, right? It could be a lot of money for summer school for kids. It could be a lot of money for after school programs, tutoring programs that people donate. Maybe not a bad thing if we are allowed to set the parameters on it. In other words, make it eligible for all and not exclude certain kids from it. Then we could have conversations. So the recommendation is for people to say, what the governor did say. He said, we're going to opt out until we know what the rules are to this, till we know what the parameters are. For now, not forever, but for now, we're going to say no. But we're going to keep the conversation going. We just want to see what happens. And that's actually the recommendation that I would make to anybody, just because it could have some good potential if we could put some guardrails on it. Okay.
Excellent.
Yep. And then these the last two slides, these are just, oh yeah, here we are. So I talked to this. I forgot. It's actually here. And this is the idea that it's no cost to states to do this, right? So it's going to be very challenging for someone to say, why wouldn't you, if you're, a bunch of people in your state want to donate money, why would you not take it? It's kind of hard to say no, right? But the rest of this I talked all about. And then these are slides from AESA again, where it just talks about, remember, let's talk about vouchers in general, the way voucher programs have run. In Arizona, in New Hampshire, in Wisconsin, these big states that have vouchers, the vast majority of kids that take advantage of those are students who have been in private school. They're not public school students. If you, and then this next one is just this facts versus myth thing that people talk about. Well, it gives it equal opportunity to all students, right, to have a private education. No, it does not. Because private schools, as you can see here, they can legally and do reject kids for a whole number of reasons, whether religion, discipline, finance, sexual orientation, gender. They do the same thing with their staff. Remember hearing the case of Regis where they took the gay counselor and they fired her when she came out and they said, sorry, you don't jive with Regis, and they could do it. There's nothing against the law around that. So we say that's not true. And then I was doing some digging for some other reason, and I met a student from Kent High School, Kent, Denver, and a nice kid, right? And I met him in a different circumstance, and I went and looked up the school. It's over $40,000 a year to go to Kent, Denver, and Regis University is $35,000. So an $8,000, $10,000 voucher is going to get you that strip mall school. Yeah, and it's not going to get you any closer to what people think it is. It is. So anyway, now I'm done. That's the end.
That was excellent. That's very thorough. And I kept making notes. I got to ask you about this. I have to ask you. You covered it.
Absolutely, anytime.
Yeah, no, but are there any questions or things that people want to follow up on?
Oh, no, I'm out of sun.
This is Kay. Can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay.
Hey there.
Hi, Lisa. How are you? Good to see
Good.
you. What I'm asking about is I really want to know if what we can do. I think part of our role as the league is to constantly kind of be ahead of where the public is. I think we understand this, but often people don't. And one of the questions as I think through this is how do we help people understand that now that they say, oh, we got all the federal funding back, we're just fine. You know, what is the problem now? You know, you're always crying, wolf, wolf, and da da da. And what can we say to people and why? We know and understand what Tabor does, but in addition to Tabor, what else holds us back that we can explain to people in Colorado specifically?
Well, I mean, I do think that kind of one of the things you can talk about is that the federal government is, and people understand this, is putting pressure on us to strip public schools down to the bare essentials, right? And that's it. And they want us to exclude a whole lot of kids that's not who we are. That's not our country. That's never been public education. And they're doing it with the threat that they would withhold some funds or they're just going to stop funding it. 10% is still a lot of money, right? It is a lot. So, and they also have the ability to do lawsuits, right? They can sue, they can do further damage than just hold back the 10%. So maybe it's time that we deshackle ourselves from the federal government when it comes to education. Right? We need to put more distance between us. And that means we're going to have to take care of our own in many, many ways. And that might mean financially now. It's probably time Colorado steps up. And we do this. Yeah.
Thank you.
You bet. It's kind of my stump speech, I think. So I'm rerunning from my seat. I haven't practiced the stump speech.
So this is Kathy Wilson.
Yeah.
With the special session that the legislature is going into, having to do with a large deficit that Colorado is facing, here they look at education as a nice big bunch of money.
Yeah.
What is protecting education from from getting money yet again divided out into other things that are not education related?
Well, there is a limit to what they can do, right? So you do the old budget stabilization factor, whatever you want to call it, the negative factor. There's a limit to what they can take with that. So constitutionally, you have a base. And then we fund above that for special populations. That's the money that they have taken back over time and now have given us back over time. So there's a base they actually can't constitutionally go below. Still, you're talking though, potentially what, 10% or more. And then if you were to take 10% on top of with the federal government money, that could leave districts, a fifth, 20% down in their funding. It would devastate. It would just be devastating. Right. So what stops them from totally doing is the Constitution. Now, I suspect we're going to have some cuts. I'm hearing about it, but not, the billion is not going to come from education. It's going to come from, they're going to try to spread it out. And it's going to be hard. It is going to be hard. Every time I see one of them, I just want to hug them and say, I'm sorry. Good luck. Because I would hate to be sitting in the JBC seat and trying to figure this out. Because either way, you cut Medicaid, you're going to cut the programs that also help kids. In right. Aurora, where I worked forever, we had our own department that did all this Medicaid billing for our special service provider and OTs, PTs, our nurses. There's so much that occurs Yeah, so I just don't know though. I just don't know what it's gonna end up looking like. I think they're gonna end up, you've heard probably, they're gonna end up trying to take some out of savings. Again, they're gonna try to do what they did last year, not take any full amount from any one area. But they cut a lot last year. They're gonna have to cut some more programs. They're gonna have to cut some stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
What about cutting out Tabor?
Well, see, and this is what I think is almost like maybe this is where the stars and the planets maybe have aligned.
Mm-hmm.
Where we can tell people, look, the other states are able to deal with this. And
Yes.
they're going to get on and they're going to have education systems and stuff. And in Colorado, what we pride ourselves on, even just fixing our roads and having our wildlife and all this stuff. Look,
Right.
we're doing it to ourselves. And
Mhm.
I've heard thoughts about like just lifting the cap, the Tabor cap for like education.
Mhm.
So stuff like that. Maybe not all at Tabor, but for education, maybe we do it. So I'm hearing different things, but it sure seems like now, if we can't get it done now, this would be a good time to have the conversation. Yeah.
Right. I agree.
Right. Well, I was just on the Great Education program prior to this, and Kennedy from the Bell Policy Center is talking about proposals and starting to push things forward to get out there to talk about.
Yep. Yeah.
So I think there's some, at least people looking at changes in the air. And I was really, actually, I am relieved to hear that when it's not as desperate as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
I'm not
It's
saying
all the
it's great.
Yeah, but it's all the support services, the wraparound services, and then those districts that have more at-risk students are the ones that are going to suffer more. But
Mhm.
that's the intent. That's exactly the intent of what they're doing. They're targeting those students.
Yep. I figured that. I'd read that in several places too, as
Yep.
we've gone
Yep.
along over the last 6 months. Wow. That's great. And I mean, you answered my school lunch program.
Yes.
So I was wondering what was going on with that and
Yeah, I saw
SNAP,
it.
because I was concerned to how that was going to look. But I
Yeah.
think that was excellent, Lisa. It really brought us up to date, and I
Yep.
really appreciate all the information that you shared with us.
You're
And
welcome.
we can
You are
continue.
as up to date as I am,
Yeah,
literally. I know nothing that I hold nothing back.
you're awesome. You're awesome. Well, we'll have to keep in touch and
Yeah.
keep track of what's going on with you and the State Board of Education, and
Sounds
finding out
good.
how we can advocate for the kinds of things we would like to see happen as we go
Yes.
along. Because I
It
think,
would be great to hear that, what your focus, what you would like, and it would be very helpful. Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
Well, with that, I think it's time to wrap things up, and appreciate everybody that hung in there and attended tonight and participated. And let's keep pushing forward and help advocate for public schools and funding them appropriately and getting teachers, good teachers in our classrooms. So we'll keep on trying. I'll keep on looking for people that help us get the information that we need to have to make decisions on how we can take action in the next few months and the upcoming years, because we're going to need to have to. So with that, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Lisa.
Bet. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.